Hello, everybody. Welcome to Curry and Mitchell, from Watts to Brooklyn, and dare I say, all points in between and beyond. I'm Sheldon Curry here along with my good friend James Mitchell, and we're going to discuss a number of topics in the sports world and politics and anything else that fits our fancy, as we like to say from time to time. So thanks for joining us. What's up, good brother? What's up?
Everything's good. Everything's good. Another beautiful day here in the Carolinas. Started out a little foggy, but the sun is out. Nice and bright. Beautiful day.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So we, as usual, we got a number of topics that we can discuss and muse over. Let's start with Week 7 in the NFL. I know you wanted to talk about those Bucks and those Panthers, and they were, the Panthers came in 1-5 with effectively a third-string quarterback and a new interim coach against the previously thought vaunted Bucks. What's your take on that?
Well, the Panthers played their usual good game on defense, and the offense was effective enough to win the games, put it that way. They didn't make a lot of turnovers. The quarterback played a solid game. They had a game plan that they stuck to. They got some production out of the running backs. Chuba Hubbard and fellow Freeman. P.J. Walker, as I said, played solid quarterback, and they eked out a win. They beat them 21-3. But on the other side of it, the Buccaneers, I don't know what's going on with them. They look terrible. Brady threw the ball 49 times. They had no running game, practically no running game, which surprised me. They didn't run it as much as I thought they should have. And I got abandoned the run altogether, and leaning on a 45-year-old quarterback who's looking more like his age, every game it seems. He threw a lot of short passes in the dirt. He doesn't look bad. And I don't know what's going on with him. Like I said, they abandoned the run. But the Panthers got a much-needed win, and I'm happy for them. And the guys came through and played a pretty good game. And the Buccaneers have a lot of problems they have to resolve if they're going to resurrect the season at all.
Yeah, I think one of the things with the Buccaneers is they're in a division that every team in the division is under 500. They're tied with Atlanta at 3-4.
Right.
So they have an ability to right their ship as it relates to making the playoffs. Now, whether or not they can right the ship enough to make a dent in the playoffs is yet to be determined. I want to go back to your notion with Brady throwing 49 times. He threw for 290 yards, which is a little less than 5 yards an attempt. So obviously it was a lot of dinking and dunking.
Absolutely.
And they scored 3 points. And you would think that something's going on. Now, I know some of his guys are out, but he has, Godwin, he has Evans, he has Fournette. So what do you think's going on?
I don't know. Well, to be fair, there were a couple of drop passes that might have been touchdowns. Well, one in particular where the big fella,
Mike Evans, I saw that. Yeah,
Evans wide open, and that was a pass. He drops that one out of 1,000 probably. But it happened. So they haven't. It just seems like things are out of sync. I don't know what it is. Some of the other catches that people said should have been caught were, they were iffy. 50-50 opportunities. Really, guys diving for the ball and stuff like that. So I don't count that. But the Evans was the most egregious one. Other than that, I really don't know what's going on. Other than that, they're not. I don't think the play calling makes sense to me. It's too much passing and relying on Brady too much, I believe. They should run the ball. If they run the ball against the Panthers, they would have. I think they probably. I don't know if they would have won the game, but they would have been in it. And to lose 21-3, not score touchdowns, it looks pretty bad. A team that's just 2 years away from the Super Bowl,
Yeah, and I guess the whole notion with Mike Evans dropping that touchdown pass, and you're being fair to Brady, but even with if everything else went according to the way it did, he'd still only scored 10 points. I know there are a number of people who said that if they score that first touchdown, it changes the complexion of the game. It's possible, particularly with a team like Carolina that's not explosive. But still, it was a bad look. And, 3-4, they're going to have to get it together. I want to, use that as a segue. We'll get back to recapping Week 7. But I want to look at an upcoming game. Tampa Bay is hosting Baltimore. this Thursday.
Wow.
And it has a chance to be one of the better Thursday night games because you're going to have Lamar against Brady. You have a Ravens team that's 4-3. It could easily be 7-0
Right.
against a struggling Tampa Bay team. So, what's your initial observation of that game?
Well, the way the Buccaneers are struggling, I would think the Ravens should beat them rather handily. But the Ravens have had a history, this year at least, of getting ahead of teams and then for some reason the second half not being very productive. So if they could put a complete game together offensively and the defense shows up a bit, I think they should handle the Buccaneers pretty easily the way they've been playing. But like you said, from week to week, you never can tell. Somehow the Buccaneers might find their magic and make a game of it. But I think it's going to be interesting, to say the least, because the Ravens have gotten Edwards back, but they lost J.K. Dobbins for the season. So, they're running a game that's kind of suspect. And it's just too much put on Lamar offensively, I believe. So they got to have to get some production from someplace else. And the defense is going to have to play a little better, even though they haven't been that bad overall.
Yeah, that's a good point. They, the biggest issue for them, as you said earlier, is that the inconsistency. In 6 of their 7 games, they've had 10 or more point leads.
Right.
And, if they could have held on to at least 1 or 2 more of those games, they'd be 5-2 or 6-1. And they'd be looking pretty. And particularly if one of those wins had been against Buffalo, they actually had a 17-point lead on the Bills.
Right.
I think the thing that goes for Tampa Bay is they're at home, and the road teams have struggled in these Thursday night affairs, and I think we know why. Short week, travel, not having a chance to rest as much, and it probably affects you more when you're on the road. But I'm actually looking forward to that game, and like you, I actually think Baltimore is going to win that game. But it should be a pretty good game. Let's go back to Week 7. The beginning of Week 7 was the previous Thursday where Arizona hosted New Orleans, and we saw Kyler Murray getting DeAndre Hopkins back after his 6-week suspension, and they look like a different team. And then, of course, though they scored 42 points, they were helped by 2 pick sixes courtesy of Andy Dalton. I know one of them may not have been his fault, but what's your observation on Arizona going forward?
Well, I think they're going to be, like you said, with Hopkins back, it seems to change the whole complexion of that team. And he hadn't played this is the first time he played this year. And he comes back, he's over 100 yards receptions right away. And the team just looked different, with different energy. And I don't know, Kyler Murray just seems to be, he has a lot more confidence in throwing the ball to him. And he seems to open up everything for everybody else. Well, he probably does open everything for everybody else because, Hopkins is one of the best, if not the best receiver in NFL right now. It's hard to pick one guy, but he's certainly in the top 5 or 6, I would think. So I think we're gonna find the Cardinals on the upswing through the rest of the year if they stay healthy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Arizona has a chance to reverse the previous couple of years where they started, fast and hot and then kind of tailed off. This year where they kind of sputtered. They get Hopkins back and a new energy. And the other thing that helps Arizona, they're also in a division that, even though I think collectively the division is better than the NFC South, that we just talked about Tampa Bay with a losing record, still tied for first. They're in a better collective division, but the leader right now is Seattle at 4-3. And they're followed by the Rams 3-3, and then the Arizona and Frisco at 3-4. So I think the good thing for any of those teams, but now we're talking about Arizona, is that they're right there in the thick of it. Let's talk a little bit about, and Tampa Bay will be one of those teams. The Green Bay Packers 3-4, Tampa Bay Buccaneers 3-4, the Los Angeles Rams 3-3, the 49ers 3-4. What's your take? I mean, and the 4 teams I just named were considered the top 4 teams going in, and that doesn't mean they can't catch fire and one or more of them can get near the top of the heap. But the season is effectively 40% over. So what's your take with maybe the top 4 teams coming into the year struggling like this?
Well, I think each of them have players missing, either by injury or departure. Like the Rams, for instance. The Rams don't have OBJ. Well, they didn't have it at the beginning of the year, last year. But at any rate, I think they're missing him. And quite frankly, I never had much confidence in Matt Stafford as quarterback. I mean, they won the championship, so you can't really argue with that too much. But he's never impressed me.
Too much.
No, so to knock him, to say he's not that effective, people saying, well, he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Right. But you look at the games they won, it was more like they almost won by default some games, with defensive backs not making interceptions that hit them right in the chest and stuff like that. They wouldn't even gotten into the play, to the championship game, stuff like that. So he's the kind of guy that always gives the opposition a chance to beat them.
Excellent point.
That's been the way he's been his whole career. And they talk about all these comebacks, how he leads the world in comebacks. But that's because he's always messing up. He's throwing all these interceptions all the time. It's not by accident. That follows him everywhere he goes. He's the same quarterback. So the Rams, in my opinion, won that because they had OBJ and Cup, who were very effective, and they had an outstanding defense. That's what won that game for them. When they won the Super Bowl for them. There's no question about that. And they missed Von Miller. He's a big miss. The defense is not the same.
And a big addition to Buffalo.
Oh, huge addition to Buffalo. So that's why Buffalo's favorite now, because they got Von Miller. Their defense is short up. While the Rams are a little bit weaker, they had some injuries and stuff like that. So, I'm not that surprised that the Rams, I expect them to necessarily have the record they have, but I'm not surprised that they're not at the top of their division. And as far as the 49ers are concerned, I don't know. You got the same old stuff with Jimmy Garoppolo. He's an inconsistent quarterback at best. Most of the time he manages the game pretty well when they're successful. But then he's another guy who always gives the opposition the opportunity to beat you. Throws too many interceptions, makes bad decisions. And that's why they were taking the wheel away from him and give it to Trey Lance, right? Was it Trey Lance?
Yeah.
Yeah, Trey Lance until he got hurt. So, so we don't know what was going to happen with that. But this is not an accident that he had his starting position taken from him, because they know what they have in him, and so they're getting the same kind of performance, but they're not at the same level. The defenses are playing quite as well, I guess, and so I'm not that shocked. The shock, I think, is in that division, obviously, of the Seattle Seahawks and my man Geno. That nobody wants to talk about, it seems.
Well, unfortunately, too many people want to say that. The clock's gonna strike midnight, which I'm just.
Right, it's a lot of wishful thinking that comes to pass, so they can keep their narrative going. But Geno's a talented guy. He's showing you that what he's capable of doing. He's getting an opportunity to play, and I couldn't be happy. I know I talk about him every week, but he hasn't disappointed yet. So, and I don't expect him to, because he plays within himself. He's been getting the job done. He's an excellent passer. He's leading in percentage of passing. He's leading all quarterbacks, stuff like that. So Seattle's a real shocker, and I'm really happy for them. And they found another stud at running back, this kid out of Michigan State.
Yeah, Kenny Walker.
Kenny Walker. Yeah, he was very impressive anyway. Yeah. It's unfortunate that this player ahead of him got hurt, but to give this guy a chance, because he's a tremendous running back. So far, he's proven that he's continuing to do what he did in college. So they're looking pretty good right now. I hope they can keep it up. They can stay away from injuries. And I don't know if the wide receiver got hurt this weekend. Yeah,
DK Metcalf. But they say that he won't have to have surgery, so they don't know how long he'll be out. Wow. But they're hoping he'll be back in a few weeks.
Yeah, but they're going to miss him. I don't think they have enough margin for error, to miss a guy like that. But you never know. There might be somebody in the wings who, like Geno, gets a chance and comes through. So I'm really happy with what they're doing so far.
Well, one of the things that's becoming clear for Seattle is they had a good 2022 draft, and some of those picks in the Russell Wilson deal, and they have a number of rookies that are playing very well for them.
True.
And so, there's been some early discussion about how this draft compares to the 2012 draft when Russell Wilson was one of the key draft choices that year that propelled them into the team that they were, that went to Super Bowls and won one. So, I think Seattle is primed, and Geno will probably keep playing the way he's playing. He's been in the league 9 or 10 years. He's learned. He's been patient. And, I saw most of the game against the Chargers, and, he outgunned Herbert.
Impossible.
No, he outgunned Herbert. Herbert threw another 50-something plus passes, and
Right.
but Geno clearly was the better quarterback.
There's no
Nobody
question
wants
about
to
that.
say that,
Nobody say they don't say it.
but
You don't hear that on any
Herbert threw
talk
twice
show.
as many passes as Geno.
Right.
And barely threw for another 100 or more yards. So that tells you who was averaging more yards per attempt.
Right. And I don't think he threw any touchdowns either.
Yeah, I think in this game he did. He threw one or two, but
maybe one. Okay.
yeah, but he didn't. I mean, again, it's not. I'm not picking on him, but I think relative to the narratives,
Right. Exactly.
relative to the narratives that you always hear, they never talk about that. And one of the things with Herbert, and again, nothing against him personally, but he's a good, and I like him. I think he's a very good young quarterback. But he's thrown now, I believe, 108 passes the last 2 weeks. For a total of 2 touchdowns, and he's averaging barely 5 yards per attempt over the last 2 weeks. So, he's doing a lot of dinking and dunking.
Sure he is.
And so, and you don't hear that. And that's the only negative, because again, week to week, we're going to talk about the inconsistency in the narratives that accompany quarterbacks, particularly when the juxtaposition is a black quarterback.
Absolutely.
And so your point with Geno, I think to keep bringing him up, he deserves it. I mean,
he does.
Most objective people, if you were picking clearly the NFC quarterback for a Pro Bowl and even all NFC, Geno would be right there.
He has to be.
He's playing better than Brady and Rodgers and all of them.
Right.
And I think he's going to keep playing better.
Well, I think so too.
I think he's going to keep playing better. Now, the flip side of that in the NFC, we talked about some of the teams that have not played as well as, like we said earlier, the prognosticators prognosticated. Now, the flip side, a lot of people thought Philly was going to be good, and they're 6-0. But the Giants are now 6-1. Nobody saw that coming. And the Vikings are 5-1, and people thought they could be good. So, you got any takes on any of those three?
Well, the Vikings are pretty consistent, and they're kind of playing the way they usually play early in the year. And a lot of times they tend to tail off in the past. And Green Bay will usually surpass them. I don't know if that's going to happen this year. The way Green Bay is playing, they have a long way to go. Speaking of teams that are disappointing, the way the Commanders handled them this past week was pretty amazing. And the way they've been playing all year, it's kind of shocking to a lot of people. I don't know. The Giants are playing out of this world, and they're playing good defense. And what has happened is, it shows you what happens when you get a coach who's smart enough to game plan towards the strength of his players. And this guy is taking his quarterback, Daniel Jones, who's a decent runner, not a great drop-back passer, and he's incorporating his running skills a lot more. And they're leaning on Barkley, and they're playing great defense. They're playing the way he's supposed to play against this guy throw for, maybe 20 passes a game. You get 150 yards, maybe a touchdown or two, maybe run for another 50, 60 yards. Barkley running for over 100 yards, and they're playing that knockdown defense. So it's not a big surprise that they're doing what they're doing. I mean, people are surprised because you didn't expect that of the Giants. But the way they've been playing has been tremendous. It's been tremendous. And again, they've had some good draft picks of young guys who are playing pretty well for them too.
Yeah, and then I think at the top of the heap is the Philadelphia Eagles. They just are coming off a bye, so they're sitting pretty. They're effectively a half a game ahead of the Giants, and I guess they're a game and a half ahead of Dallas. So what has been referred to as the NFC least the last few years, are now looking like potentially the best conference in the best division and clearly in the NFC and maybe in all of football, with the Washington Commanders 3-4 pulling up the rear. So it's interesting. Real quickly before we, I got a couple of more NFL queries I want to discuss with you. But let's go to the New York Jets. They're 5-2. They won 4 in a row, and they just had a devastating injury with Breece Hall.
Right.
You think they can keep it going?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, Breece Hall has been having an outstanding year. He's been a big part of their success. Well, I heard they just picked up Robinson, I believe.
Yeah, James Robinson from Jacksonville.
Yeah. So I don't know, what he has left in the tank. But if he can come in and give them anywhere anywhere near what Hall has been giving them. I don't see any reason why they should not keep doing what they're doing. They're playing really good football, surprisingly. And I guess Salah's getting the last laugh right now, you know.
Yeah, he is. Their defense is playing all lights out.
They are. So they can keep that up. And they, like I said, they can get some production out of this running back, out of whoever they have left at running back. I don't see any reason why they should drop off. They just have to keep doing what they're doing. Yeah, it's been quite a surprise. Who would think that, you know, after the first 7 games, that the Giants and the Jets combined record would be what?
11-3.
11-3. Who saw that coming?
Yeah, you'd have lost the farm on that one, boy.
Absolutely.
Or 1-1, I guess. I guess it depends on what. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
You know I know the NFL is a violent sport and there's a lot of injuries,
Right.
but it seemed to be this week, and maybe it was because it was key players. You know, J.K. Dobbins. I know you had mentioned out for the season. I had heard 4 to 6 weeks, but as we mentioned off the as me and you talked off the air, you know, if he's out 6 weeks and he's eligible to come back week 13, 14, the regular season's almost over. And given the devastating injury he had last year that caused him to miss the whole season, and now he's injured again, he probably will be out the rest of the season.
I would imagine so.
And then there was a key injury. I guess he's week to week, and that is Mike Williams, the wide receiver for the Chargers. He sustained the injury. They lost their starting corner, J.C. Jackson, for the season. He had a knee injury. Cleveland Njoku, the great tight end for the Cleveland Browns, is reported to be out 4 to 5 weeks. That's a big injury for them. We talked about Metcalf briefly and Breece Hall. And Dallas lost one of their starting corners in Jordan Lewis. He's out for the year. So I'm just these injuries, man. I guess it's part of the game, but you know, a lot of teams who are doing well have lost some key players.
That's true.
Yeah, lost some really key players, and I know Frisco had some of their key guys have come back, and I guess it didn't matter to Patrick Mahomes because they spanked Frisco in Frisco.
Oh, they sure did.
44-23. Patrick went for 423. What's your take on them picking up McCaffrey?
I think it's a good
They
move.
being San Francisco.
Right. Well, any team that would pick up McCaffrey is a good move. McCaffrey's an excellent football player, and you know, depending on how they utilize him, he can't be anything but an addition to their team. And you know, I expect him to play very well for them. He's played well as long as he stays healthy. That's the key thing because he's been hurt a lot the last couple of years, and I think that's due to overuse by the Panthers. I mean, the Panthers, I mean, almost every time nobody else got a chance to run the ball, but he was there. He was getting like 35 carries a game. You know, either passing or running, something like that. It's just he's not built for that. You know, he's an excellent player. He has great skills. I think he's just a victim of overuse, and that's why he's been out the last couple of years. Played maybe 3 or 4 games the last 2 years, and then he's out for the rest of the season. But I think in San Francisco, they'll be smart enough to utilize his skills without overuse because they don't have to, because they have a lot of other good options on offense. So I expect him to do well in that system.
Yeah, I agree. He'll join Debo Samuel, Ayuk, George Kittle. Wilson, they got some playmakers in San Francisco.
They do.
And you know, it's going to be interesting. Is his acquisition going to end up? Because you know, there've been some. You know, there's always been acquisitions, but in the last 8 to 10 years, there've been some key ones. And my memory, you know, the most recent was last year. You've already spoke to it about Odell Beckham Jr. and Von Miller helped leading the Rams to their title. And the year before, I know he's fallen out of favor, but Antonio Brown to Tampa Bay.
Oh, absolutely.
He was a key acquisition in their Super Bowl run. And then the year before that, Terrell Suggs for KC.
That's right. That's
you
right.
know,
Suggs.
So you know, it's you know, San Francisco's hoping that will be the case for them this year. Before we turn away from the NFL, a couple of more things. One is, and I'm not laughing at them, but I just heard that Matt Ryan has been replaced by Sam Ehlinger at quarterback. Now, they said that Matt Ryan has a slight sprain of his shoulder, but I think they were going to replace him anyway because he's thrown 9 or 10 interceptions and fumbled the ball 11 or 12 times. Something unheard of in a whole season, and he's done it in 7 games.
Yeah,
What's your take? What's your take on the former MVP? I shouldn't laugh.
I know.
You know, I'm not a big Matt Ryan fan. I mean, I've always thought he was overrated, but
he absolutely was. You know, he's one of those guys who benefited from having great receivers his whole career, and it's the typical thing that they do in the NFL. When it was all European quarterbacks, and you give all the credit to these guys throwing the ball, and no credit to the receivers. Now you throwing the balls to Julio Jones and Ridley and guys like that who are getting open and dive and make all kind of incredible catches, you're going to pile up a lot of yardage. And that's what he did. He wasn't a bad, you know, he wasn't a bad, horrible quarterback. He was nothing outstanding about it. You know, he won an MVP, which is a whole other conversation you could have. You know, but he also blew a Super Bowl. You know, nobody wants to talk about that, but, you know, even though that it was a combination of him and Dan Quinn, his first time as a head coach, you know, making some pretty horrible decisions in the Super Bowl, allowed the Patriots to come back and beat them. And, I mean, if you remember that Super Bowl at the end of the game, after they had squandered a first half lead.
28-3.
Yeah, they were in position late in the game, the last quarter, to kick a field goal, and that would have won the game for them. But there's 2 things he couldn't do. He couldn't throw an interception or take a sack. So what did he do? He took a sack or 2. He got him out of field goal range.
He did. They were up 8 points with about 5 minutes to go. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you see a situation like that. He's a experienced quarterback. He wasn't a rookie. You know, he's supposed to throw that ball up in the stands if he had to, but not take a sack. You know, but that's what he did, and they wound up losing. So I've never been impressed with Matt Ryan. He's another stat-stuffing guy who be thrown into the Hall of Fame like all these other guys who never really did anything. You know, and that's the way it goes. I'm not surprised that his time is up. And I think it was a mistake to go get him to begin with. And again, they talk about these teams who, like Indianapolis, all these retread quarterbacks. Before Matt Ryan, they had
Carson Wentz,
and before him, they had your favorite player,
Phillip Rivers.
Phillip Rivers, you know, all these guys, all these retread guys, you know, and they say, well, you know, they've tried, you know, going for these old guys, you know, old established quarterbacks. And you look at these teams. You know, now, I don't know how many draft picks they had in the years that Lamar Jackson came out of college or my man Jalen Hurts came out of college, but I'm sure they had an opportunity to pick one of those guys as quarterback since they needed a quarterback so badly. But whoever's making decisions in their organization didn't want either of these guys. So what are they looking at when they see these guys play, you know, that I'm not seeing? You know, if I was in either of their rooms on draft night and Lamar Jackson was still available, there's nowhere in the world I would not have taken him. And I know Lamar was getting beat up coming out of college. He couldn't do this, he couldn't do that. And then Jalen Hurts was just ignored. I mean, he was a 3rd-round pick by the Eagles when they took him. It's ridiculous. We see what these guys want. They want a white quarterback at the helm. And they'll take these old retreads rather than giving a young guy who can play an opportunity if he has the wrong pigmentations. And so they get what they deserve, you know. They keep going to these retreads, and that's what you get. It's like when you go buy a tire for your car. You get a retread, you take a chance, right? So.
Yeah, and I think to your point with the Ryans and the Staffords and the Phillip Rivers, it's, you know, the way the game is played today, you can build up a lot of statistics,
right,
and particularly aggregate stats. You know, I know people who are into analytics and they get into the rate numbers and say, oh, no, you can really find out who's good or not. But we know how the narratives work. And when a guy, you know, is throwing for 4,500 yards and 29 TD passes, you know, they're always front and center in everybody's mind, you know, that they're so good. And nobody talks about the things that they can't do, particularly in critical situations. And I think that's where the NFL has changed from, you know, 40 years ago. And again, not to be a dinosaur, but it used to be a time when a quarterback wasn't good, his statistics showed it. I mean, clearly showed it. It wasn't even relative. You know, back in the day when there was a lot more interceptions thrown, the worst quarterbacks would throw 10 touchdowns and 28 interceptions. Well, now you could be a bad quarterback and still throw 28 TD passes and 16 interceptions. And if you happen to be a Matt Stafford led the NFL in interceptions last year.
Right.
And they won a Super Bowl.
Exactly.
And
That's
so
the
they're
point.
able to market these guys and play down the negatives. And that's what you saw, what I think we've seen with the Matt Ryans. And like you said, they're okay players, but
Right.
you know, like you said, these guys are going to end up in the Hall of Fame. And why?
Sure.
Why are they going to? You know, when you look at Phillip Rivers, other than all these numbers, what did he ever do?
Nothing.
What did he ever do, really?
Nothing.
You know, until last year, same could be said of Matt Stafford, except for that one year Atlanta got, same could be said of Matt Ryan. And that's the part that's so just, you know, and these guys keep coming through the pipeline. They bring up more and more and more of these guys. Meanwhile, the black quarterbacks have one bad game and everybody wants to get rid of them.
Right.
You know, or tell you what Lamar Jackson can't do.
Right, exactly.
You know, and I just think so. I know it sounds like we're beating a dead horse, but over a long period of time, man, it's just it needs to stop. You know,
the truth is the truth. I mean, you know, we're caught in this, you know, this vortex. Like this, things just won't change, man. And as long as people come with this, first thing they look at is race. That's what you're going to wind up with.
Right,
you know? And that's all we're facing here.
Yeah, instead of being able to enjoy the games and enjoy the players, good, bad, or indifferent, white, black, or blue, you know, you cringe at some of the things that you hear these announcers talk about. And at one of these podcasts, we're going to talk about what I consider right-wing announcing. Where you just hear some of the most egregious things from people. You know, I'll say one thing here. How many times have you seen a receiver, he's 6'2", the ball's thrown 9 feet over his head, it barely touches his fingertip, but because it was thrown by certain quarterbacks, what does the announcer say? He's got to make that play.
You got to make that catch, yeah.
Got to make that play.
You got to make that play, right?
Or one more, when the quarterback overthrows the receiver, the announcer says the reception couldn't be made, or the receiver couldn't make the catch, making it never saying it was just an overthrow. Why can't you just say you overthrew the guy?
Right.
So and then when it gets to the black quarterbacks, it's the opposite.
It's opposite, absolutely.
And somebody was talking about the other day when Brady throws a 5-yard out and he goes for 80. You know, Brady threw an 80-yard touchdown. Okay, but when a certain quarterbacks do that, they'll talk about catch and run.
Oh yeah.
Letting you know it was 5 yards and then catch and run. You know, and this goes on so much, and I think people who are not in tune, they don't understand it. So they, you know, but if you really watch this, and what happens is unconsciously it plays.
It
You
sure
know,
does.
you know, if you keep saying, you know, Brady threw an 80-yard touchdown pass when he threw a 5-yard out, and Jalen Hurts do a catch and run when he throws his 80, it creates these different thought processes for people who are not paying attention. So I'm gonna leave it alone because we got to do a special show for that. My last NFL rant, and you can add more if you want. What do you think about the NFL refs getting the autograph from Mike Evans?
You know, I just saw that. Apparently, it's against the rules that for them to do that. Now, on one level, you know, I didn't know that there was a rule. To be honest, I never heard about that rule, and I don't know if I really have a problem with that. I don't know. If they're giving them preferential treatment, if that's what you're suggesting, then that's one thing. But I don't know. I don't have a big reaction to that. Like I said, I'm surprised that there's a rule against that. You know, but I don't know. It doesn't really bother me a lot.
Well, it's a bad optic.
Other than the fact that it is a rule and they know that.
Yeah, it's a bad optic though, because it's like what it can mean. You know, if Mike Evans does that, and then the next time they play, he gets a favorable call, and so you don't want that optic. I understand the last time that happened. The referee a few years ago, he never worked another game. So they are reporting that these two guys are at the end of their careers. So I don't know if the NFL is going to let them back on the field or not. But it's a bad optic.
I guess.
I'd like to believe it wouldn't matter, but
Right, but you never know.
You started going, well, why do you want his autograph? And
right.
and how many people behind, because that happened to be caught on it was recorded in the tunnel. What happens if they're picking up the phone calling Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers and hey, can I get your blah blah blah? And he says, sure, if you just give me that call tomorrow morning.
I understand. It doesn't look bad. Like I said, I wasn't aware that was a rule, but I understand why it is. Like you said, bad option. Two more things. I just want to make a comment about Dak's return.
Okay.
I'm glad he played very well for a guy who hadn't played in several weeks, and I'm glad that the Cowboys are stuck with the same game plan that they were using when Cooper Rush was there. Not asking them to do things that were unnecessary. A lot of long passes because he was back. So if Dallas keeps playing like that, they're obviously going to be better because Dak's a much better quarterback than Cooper Rush, without a doubt. So when it's need be for him to do something extraordinary, he's more capable of doing it than Cooper Rush is, and I think that's been proven. So I'm really happy about Dak's return. I think he's just going to be better and sharper the next time out. And the other thing is just from last night's game with Justin Fields. I'm glad to see they finally took the wraps off him and let him use his athletic ability a little bit more, because he's a guy that can run a bit, and they've incorporated his running ability in their game plan, and you see the results of that. Last night, he had an outstanding game, and they won.
And he made some excellent passes.
Excellent passes. There was one, I saw a clip, it was Mahomes-like. I don't know if you saw that. He kind of threw a sidearm under the defensive guys.
Yeah, he did, for a touchdown.
Yeah, it reminded me of Patrick.
Yeah.
I said, go ahead, Justin. Yeah. So I'm really happy for him. And I hope that he can just stay healthy. They can get some help on the offensive line. They can stop making him just be a drop-back passer and let him pass more. Because he's been throwing like less than 20 passes a game, less than 15 sometimes. So if they keep having a more well-rounded offensive structure for him, they're going to find more success, I believe. And I have a lot of faith in him. I think he's an excellent quarterback that has a possibility to be one at any rate.
Yeah, it was an excellent game. It was the first time, and I've seen them a couple of three times. It was the first time I saw them be very creative on the offensive end, and I think they can have a very good boost from this game because one, New England is a good defensive team, period.
Right.
And two, New England have been playing very well. The last two opponents, they held them to a combined 15 points.
That's right.
And for Chicago to go in there, and they just outplayed them, period.
They did.
And Justin played very well. So I think they're going to get a big bounce from this game. And so I'm like you. I was glad to see that for a change with somebody, give this kid an opportunity to excel.
Right.
And we'll see what happens going forward. I'm going to switch reels to the NBA. No. Let me step back. I'm sorry. Major League Baseball. I don't know why. I had to apologize for that. The World Series starts this upcoming Friday. I think that's October the 28th. Houston and Philly. You got Houston had the best record in the American League and undefeated in the playoffs against Philly, who had the sixth best record in the National League, and they got all the way to the finals. So, what's your initial observation?
Well, Philly's got hot at the right time. That's my initial observation for the National League. And Bryce Harper came back, and he's been tremendous. He's been red hot in these playoffs, and I really like him. I've always liked him as a ball player. But there were times there were strategies that took place in both series, and we'll talk about maybe the Yankees and Houston a little bit later. But in the Philly series, the Padres in a desperation situation where you lose and you go home, and to let Bryce Harper come up and beat you in the eighth inning with a 2-1 home run is egregious on the part of the manager. When you have your ace left-handed reliever who's lights out, this guy Hader, and warming up in the bullpen, you don't bring him in to pitch to Harper. I don't understand that at all. In an
elimination game, you're down 3-1.
Elimination game, and you're winning. You're ahead in the game in the eighth inning.
And if you win the game, you go back home.
Yeah, you get another chance to play.
Yeah.
If you lose, you go home. And he didn't bring in his best pitcher to face this guy. And Bryce Harper may well hit a home run off him too. He's as hot as he's been. Who knows? But at least you go with your best against their best. So I don't understand what these guys are thinking about on that level. And then as far as the Houston and the Yankees are concerned, the Yankees have just continued their second half collapsed. Their offense is stagnant. Nobody's hitting, and there was some questionable plays, decisions by Boone in that series that cost him a lot. In the previous game where he didn't use his ace reliever in a crucial situation, and it cost him. And so, I don't know what to say about that. And then even in this last game with Cortez, was obviously hurt, they saw something. The Yankees were in the lead at the time, and he obviously saw something wrong with his pitcher. His velocity was down, and he came out to counsel with him with his trainer. Now, the manager comes out with the trainer because they see something's wrong physically with the guy, and he allowed the pitcher to talk him out of taking him out. And the next pitch, the guy hits a 3-run home run and ties the game, right? So, I don't know. So that can be called into question. But the Yankees, I didn't expect the Yankees. I figured that Houston would beat them, whether it was 4 games or 5, that they would eventually beat them, that Houston just had a better team. But the Yankees just fell apart completely. It's just too much dependent on a home run. And they have a lot of holes in their lineup, the guys who don't hit for good average. And they don't do anything but hit home runs. They barely move runners ahead, and the game has just changed so much. The Yankees are a boom or bust kind of team. They hit the long ball and they're gonna lose.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, so it's gonna be interesting. I'm looking forward to this series coming up. I think Houston has a bit deeper pitching. I think they're a better team all around. But you never know. Philly's playing pretty good right now. They're pretty hot. They can keep their hitting up. Where they be hitting them home runs and stuff. It might be an interesting series. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Back to your point about the manager for the Padres not bringing in Hader. It brings to mind the way they play the game today. I know Suarez for San Diego's. He had a really good season, particularly the second half. He throws really hard, and I guess he was going to have him go finish the 8th inning and go to Hader in the 9th. But to your point, Hader would have been the perfect pitcher to pitch against Bryce Harper, at least left to left, and maybe make it a little tougher. So I think sticking with those formulas. Again, it didn't work out for them, and they went home. The series coming up. The first glance, you always take a series like this and you say, well, Houston won 160 games during the regular season, Philly 87, and I know Houston's favored. And Houston's this is the 4th World Series appearance in 6 years, back to back under Dusty. But when you look really closer to Philly, they actually have a chance. And what I mean by that is Philly started the season really poorly. I think I was looking back through the early season record. They were 21-29 after 50 games. And shortly thereafter, I guess they fired their manager. And they finished the regular season 66-46, and they're 9-2 in the playoffs. So they've been pretty hot. That's, I think, 75-48. But as I say that, I looked at Houston. And even though Philly is hot, and they can beat anybody. And baseball's that kind of sport anyway. But Houston started the season 11-11. They finished 95-45, and you had the 7 playoff games. They won 102-45. So they're hotter than Philly, and Philly was hot for over 3 months. So when I looked at that, I said, "Oh, Philly got a shot," and they do. The big difference is the pitching, and you alluded to that. They're pretty even offensively. I looked through; they're pretty close in batting average. They're pretty close in home runs. Philly stole a few more bases, but they both steal bases at about a 79% success rate. But they both defend pretty well. Even though Philly has a tendency sometimes to have a bad inning or two, from what I gather. But the big difference is pitching. Houston has an ERA a whole run better than Philly. And they have more guys. They got 6 competent starters and 6 competent relievers. So you would think that's going to mean something in a series. So I'm taking Houston in 6. I'm taking Houston in 6, even though I know Philly has an opportunity, and they got to find a way to keep Bryce Harper from killing them. But if they can do that, I think they got a good shot. But it ought to be a good series. It ought to be a really good
It should
series.
be.
It ought to be a real good series.
I agree.
I want to turn the attention to the NBA. I know that the NBA is a week into its season, so I don't know if there's a lot to talk about other than a particular player or two. Ja Morant's got off to a great start.
Right.
Dallas is looking pretty good. They look improved. They added Christian Wood and some more pieces, and they got Tim Hardaway Jr. back from injury last year, so they look pretty good.
Right.
Philly's off to a slow start. They finally won their first game last night. I think they're 1-3.
Right.
Lakers are doing what people thought they can't shoot. They're 0-3, shooting 21% from three, which they say is the worst three-point shooting in the history except for one team for 3 games, any 3-game stretch. I mean, that's horrible, yeah. And to shoot the number that they're shooting.
Right.
They're not only shooting 21%, but I think they're averaging almost 40 attempts. That's ludicrous.
Insane.
Yeah, that's ludicrous.
That is.
So, I don't know if you got any observations about the NBA season or not. I know it's early.
It's a little early. I don't have any strong, other than I don't know what the Lakers are doing. I don't know who they have on their team pretty much. They seem to come up with guys that I don't. Well, let me be upfront.
No, it's fair. It's fair.
I don't follow. I admit I don't follow the NBA like I used to.
Yeah, but you're not missing
anything. Out of the way first. Yeah, but secondly, who in the world's on their roster? Who put that team together? I don't understand what's going on with them. Some of the guys, like you said, they can't shoot 3, but they're shooting 40 a game. It's insanity.
It is.
It's the definition of insanity to do the same thing over and over again, get the same result. So why are you doing that? Why play that way? I don't like the 3-point shot as a strategy anyway. I'm an old dinosaur and all that crap. I don't believe in the 3-point. I wish they didn't have it. I think it's ruined the game in a lot of ways, along with a lot of other things. I go on the litany about basketball, so don't get me started. But but I don't understand what the Lakers are doing, what they think they're going to accomplish with the team they have to play the way they're playing is ridiculous. Yeah. And I don't get it. I really do not get it. But outside of seeing a lot of these young players, some of the guys you alluded to, like every once in a while I see John Morant, it's incredible stuff that this guy does. He has to be one of the best athletes in the league. He's incredible. The stuff he can do. Zion's back. He got hurt again the other night, so hopefully he won't miss too much time, if any. But I like to see young guys like that because of their tremendous athletic ability and some of the things they see are just spectacular. But as far as the NBA in general is concerned, I'm not as interested as I used to be, as from years back, because the game has just changed so much that I really don't enjoy it much anymore.
Yeah, some people say it's become a lazier game from a strategic standpoint because most teams allow several players to shoot threes.
Right.
It's kind of like the striking out in baseball now, where there's no consequence of that.
Right, that's
and
true.
So it changes the whole dynamic of the game. And so I know the Lakers are maybe a severe example, but how can you shoot that poorly? The way your team was how can you shoot that poorly and continue to shoot that many threes on a team that was constructed poorly and you knew you weren't a 3-point shooting team from the beginning? And that's what's wrong with the game. It's even though the Lakers are the worst example of it, there are other teams over the last few years that were not very good 3-point shooting teams that were shooting 30, 35, 40 3-point shots a game. And that's hurting the game. It is.
Right. It is.
It's hurting the game.
Every time I see a guy like Anthony Davis run out into the corner and shoot a 3, I cringe.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy is a tremendous ball player. And you can tell me if he's 10 feet from the basket, and taking shots, nobody can stop this guy. Because he's running to the he's looking to shoot threes. I mean, and Joel Embiid, all these guys, everybody does it now. It's just absurd. It's completely absurd, in my opinion, for guys to play that way. But that's, like you said, that's the way the game is played. And I guess people are willing to pay money to go see it, but I'm not. I can't watch it. I can barely watch an NBA game. It's hard for me to watch a game.
Yeah,
the way they play is just too. It's foreign to what I know basketball. My perception of what basketball is. It's not basketball anymore. So there's another sport, and people enjoy it fine. They like it, but it's not for me. It really isn't.
Yeah, I think when you think about the Embiids and the Anthony Davises of the world, it's okay to have the ability to
Yeah,
occasionally
and then
go
your
out and
arsenal,
stretch the
of
defense.
course.
But given that the game is so finesse oriented now, and they try to call it positionless basketball, you get somebody like Embiid, what 7'1", 280, with
Right.
that skill set. Who's gonna stop you
Right.
inside?
Nobody.
You should
Nobody.
live inside.
Nobody. If I was his coach, I would have a bat on my bench and threaten him with it every time he thought about shooting for more than 15 feet.
Watch it, Mitchell. Watch it.
I know. It just drives me crazy to see that, you know?
Yeah.
They denigrate the inside game, and now they call a guy like DeRozan, well, a mid-range game. I mean, come on, because he's not shooting threes every time he touches the ball.
Right.
You know, Kawhi Leonard. These guys are Butler. These guys are tremendous athletes, and they put
Right.
up numbers like crazy. And the teams are winning, you know, but they don't shoot threes, so they're not, you know, they're not the shiny thing in the window anymore. It's absurd. It's really absurd. It's, like I said, that's the way they want to play, so they can have it. You know, it's not for me. It really isn't.
Yeah.
And, so.
Well, on going down memory lane, you know, we're going to do that from time to time, and I want to go back a little over 50 years ago. It was an epic Western Conference Final series with the defending champion at the time, Milwaukee Bucks, against the Los Angeles Lakers. And, you know, when you go back and look at that, there's a few things. Number one, it was only the second matchup in NBA history where two teams had won 60 games that matched up in the playoffs. The previous one, as you well know, was the 66-67 season where Wilt Chamberlain led Philadelphia, defeated the Bill Russell-led Celtics in the Eastern Conference Final. It was the only other time 260-win teams. So when you get to 72, you have the 69-13 Lakers, led by Chamberlain and West, against the 63-19 Bucks, led by Kareem and Oscar Robertson.
Right.
And so it was a 6-game series, and there was a few observations, and I just real quickly, I want to pay homage, but also that was the year the Lakers won 33 games in a row.
Right.
That's still a record. And that record was broken by the Bucks that year in Milwaukee when Kareem, they spanked the Lakers. I don't remember the score, but it was double-digit win.
Right.
So they get to the playoffs, and the first game of the playoffs in Los Angeles, Milwaukee beats them, I think it was like 93-71 or 72. Now, so not only did they beat them by over 20 points on their home court, not only is Milwaukee the defending champions, not only had Milwaukee ended their 33-game win streak, but that Laker team averaged 120 points a game, so they held them almost 50 points less than the season average. And I recall, even if you don't look back at the records, that folks were concerned, like, wait a minute, this is the defending champs. They're led by Kareem and Oscar. They got the Lakers' number, but then the Lakers turned around and won two extremely close games, and game 2 was 135-134 in LA. If Milwaukee wins that game, they go up 2-0. At the end of the day, the Lakers ended up winning the series in 6 games, and they went on to beat the Knicks. And I want to highlight Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I went back and looked. He was in his 3rd year. Check this out. 33.7 points, 17.5 rebounds, almost 5 assists, averaged 45 minutes a game. And Wilt, at 36 years old, averaged 11 points, 19 boards, and averaged 46 minutes a game. Now, the last part about the minutes per game is the one for me. Think about that. Think about the guys today with load management and all that now. You got guys barely playing 40 minutes in a game.
Right.
And these guys are averaging and battling like that. So I just wanted to throw that out. And, of course, Oscar, he played well, and West played well, and they had Bobby Dandridge, and they had a number of Hall of Famers on on both teams. So Gail Goodrich to the Lakers, and so I just wanted to kind of go back down memory lane, the epic Western Conference Finals, and everybody pretty much figured whoever won that would be the champs, and it was the Lakers that year. You got anything you want to add to that?
Well, you know, that was basketball at its best, no question, and that was the era, and before that I treasure the most. And you know how I feel about Wilt. I think Wilt's the most dominant player that ever played the game. And the guy never came out of the game, you know. So he played 46 minutes, not surprising me, because that's what he did every night, you know. And what can I say? That was basketball to me. Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, Kareem. I mean, you can't get better than that. You know, I remember this I remember that series very well. You know, but that was part of the golden age of basketball for me. Like I said, and I'm privileged to watch those guys up close all those years, their time careers. You know, and seeing old games in the old Madison Square Garden in New York. You know, I grew up in Brooklyn, and seeing Wilt and Russell and Eldon and Oscar and going at it. Back in the days, we used to have doubleheaders. I'll never forget I went to a doubleheader at the old Madison Square Garden. It used to be on 8th Avenue and 50th Street in Manhattan. And the first game was Cincinnati and Los Angeles. Oscar Robertson and Elgin Bell. And that's what they were. They had been in the league maybe 2-3 years. And you can imagine what that game was like. I think they both scored like about 35 points apiece or something like that. It was a tremendous game. The second game was the Boston Celtics against the New York Knicks. A doubleheader. I must have paid about $3.50 to get in. That's $3.50, folks. Not $50. See, a doubleheader, which is unheard of. They don't have doubleheaders anymore.
They don't.
That's before the NBA wasn't extremely popular like it is now. And they had to have attractions to get people to come to games. So they used to have doubleheaders. And Bill Russell, let me get Bill Russell. The Knicks had this guy, I don't remember this cat. I think he played at Western Kentucky or something like that. Billy the Hill McGill. Remember that name?
Yeah, I do. I remember.
Yeah, Billy McGill is a 7-footer. He used to shoot a jumping hook shot. Well, he tore Russell apart in that game. He scored like 33 points. Yeah, I mean, he could shoot. You know, Russell was a great defender, but you know, you think about Kareem Skyhook not being able to be blocked. This guy used to jump and shoot a hook. So McGill went for like 33 that night. Of course, the Celtics probably beat them by about 20. You know, but to see that display was amazing. And my $3.50 ticket had me pretty close to the court. You know, I was up in the rafters, and so I had a bird's eye view of that matchup. And just to see those guys play, Sam, Casey Jones. You know, and, it was just wonderful experience, man.
Yeah. You mentioned it's the golden age, and some people will kind of frown on that and say, well, how can that be the golden age? Pre-Magic, pre-Jordan, pre-Bird, but I think what you're speaking to is that these were the players that grew the game. That you know, the all-time greats, the Baylors, the Wests, the Chamberlains, the Russells, the Robertsons, and I mean that's basketball royalty. And you know, this generation and the future generation need to remember those guys, and particularly the black players for all they had to go through and what they had to withstand. And so I agree. So that's why, you know, like to go down memory lane, and I'll throw another couple. Go ahead.
And additionally, why I refer to that as the golden age, but for me, that was when basketball was played when the rules of the game were enforced. You weren't allowed to carry the ball.
Travel.
You weren't allowed to travel. You had to walk. You couldn't turn the ball over and dribble. You know, these guys with these great hesitation moves where they drive and stop and palm the ball and then continue to dribble again. You couldn't do that. You had to keep the ball between your floor and the hand. So that to me was basketball. That's why I say this game today is not basketball. They call it that, but it's not the same game. It's a different game by different rules. You know, there's a lot of hand checking back then. It was a more physical game back then. But there were certain rules that were enforced that are no longer enforced, have been enforced for the last 30 years, in my opinion. And the game has changed. So that's why I've lost interest in it, because it's not basketball as I know basketball to be, the way I learned it, and the way I played it when I did play, and the way I saw some of the greatest guys that I've ever seen play the game.
And also because of because you could hand check and whatnot, it made the better teams, it fostered ball movement.
Right.
And, you know, so unless you were a great player like a Baylor or somebody, you know, you had to move the ball to get a good shot.
Right, that's true. That's true.
And so I think that it was a different game. So, and just the last thing I'll say, you know, I'd mentioned a few folks. There were some other guys. Lucius Allen, remember he was a hell of a player. I think I mentioned Bob Dandridge and Gail Goodrich, who are Hall of Famers. Jimmy McMillan from Columbia. He was, matter of fact, he was a quiet assassin back in those days. He replaced Elgin Baylor when Baylor retired early in that season.
Right. Happy Hairston.
Happy Hairston, yeah. And Milwaukee had Curtis Perry. I don't know if you remember Curtis Perry. He was big time rebounder, man. Him and Happy Hairston used to battle on the boards, and And Milwaukee had Wally Jones coming off the bench. I don't know if you remember Wally Jones. I think he played for Philly once too.
Played with Philly.
Yeah.
He played with Wilt in Philly.
Yeah, he did. That's right. He was on that team. He was on that 67 team. Absolutely. And then somebody that I know Lou Ray Ellis was on that Laker team, that 72 team.
Oh yeah.
From your neck of the woods.
Yeah. Thomas Jefferson High School, Brooklyn. Yeah. There's a story to tell you about Leroy. See some classic games. They played Boys High School. Yeah. And just classic battles. Tony Jackson was a name that nobody's not familiar with anymore, but he was a tremendous ball player, All-American, Census All-American at St. John's. In my opinion, the best players ever played at St. John's in the history of the school. And go look him up sometime and see what he did when he was at college. Unfortunately, he got caught up in being accused of being involved with gamblers, which is a long story, but I can tell you his perspective on it. He's a very dear friend of mine. At some point, maybe we'll talk about that. But, that's why. I mean, just an aside, a couple of years ago, when Curry broke the three-point record with 14 three-pointers in the game, I think it was something like that. What people don't know is the record that he actually broke was Tony Jackson's record from the American Basketball League from like 1962.
Wow.
Yeah. Tony made 13. He's playing for the Chicago Majors. He made 13 three-pointers in the game. He was a tremendous. He's one of the greatest shooters I've ever seen. To this day, he was a deadly jump shooter. He could shoot it. And we'll get to some Tony Jackson stories in another program maybe, but he was a tremendous guy that nobody knows about. He's a great ball player out of Brooklyn. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things we want to do with this show is bring back to life some of the people that people either have forgotten or never knew about because it's important. Right. That's a great segue. I don't know the name of the documentary, but this Thursday in Beverly Hills, there's going to be a documentary on Raymond Lewis, the standout L.A. prodigy from the early 70s, who was a first-round pick of the Philadelphia 76ers in the 1972-73 season. Doug Collins, I think, was the top pick, first or second pick, and then Ray Lewis was drafted later in the first round. I think it was maybe 13th or 14th. Right. And, he grew up in my old neighborhood and went to Bourbon Day High, and then he went to Cal State LA, and I think as a sophomore, he was the second leading scorer in the country behind Bird Averett. I don't know if you remember Bird Averett at Pepperdine.
Sure.
He played a little bit in the ABA. And Ray Lewis shot out at the in training camp, just showed out and was shooting out Doug Collins the whole bit. Right. And he wanted more money, and Philly said no. And of course, there was also some racial dynamics. And Ray Lewis just couldn't believe it. He's one of those guys, and during that time, that's like, this guy can't hold my jockstrap. And he never played in the NBA. He got blackballed, and unfortunately, kind of died early. I think he was not even 50 years old when he passed in the early 2000s. But they're doing a documentary on him, and man, I saw him a few times. And some of it was just Sandlot, and you hear people just like you talk about Tony Jackson. He is the greatest pure shooter I've ever seen with my own eyes. Now, of course, now that you have the Steph Currys in the NBA, obviously you have to temper that a little because Ray Lewis didn't do it there, but he would have done it. And he could pull up from 30, 35 when it wasn't even a three-point line. I mean, they didn't have three except for the ABA. They didn't have it in the NBA. So I'm hoping to catch that documentary, but I just want Raymond Lewis. People need to look him up. Yeah, he was an outstanding player, and it was unfortunate he never got a chance to play in the NBA.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Where did he play in college?
I played at Cal State LA, and they were a Division I school at the time. And I remember seeing he played. I remember Jerry Tarkanian, the Hall of Fame college basketball coach. Before he went to UNLV and won his championships, he built the Long Beach State program, and he had Ed Ratliff, who was an All-American back in the early '70s. And Ray Lou played them once, and I remember he went for something like 53 points against Tark's team. Man, I mean, this kid was. He was something else, man. Raymond Lewis was something else.
I can imagine.
He was something else. So I'm hoping, I don't know how much footage, but I guess they got to have some footage.
Right.
Hopefully a new generation can see him because
that's wonderful. Yeah. there are guys like that all over the country. The more I meet people, especially black people from different parts of the country, almost everybody I've met has a story like that about some local guy that a lot of people may not have heard of. There are all kinds of guys in New York, because New York's such a big place. If you come out of Harlem and Brooklyn, like I've heard of Joe Hammond, people like that. I mean, this guy who he put up numbers that were ridiculous. Joe Hammond was going 50, 60, 70 points a game. And some guys, I think it was Philip, tried to get him. It might have been, what's the coach of St. John's?
Luke Honeysecker.
You tried to get him to come play with the Nets, I think it was. It was the same kind of thing. Joe Hammond was a guy out of Harlem. He was a street guy, he was a hustler. He was making more money in the streets than they could pay him, so he wouldn't come play for him. And that's a true story. This guy's still around. He's still around. Joe Hammond was tremendous. This guy, he was amazing. Like several guys like that in New York, like that. It's incredible, man. But yeah.
Let's. You have anything you want to add outside of the athletic arena?
I just want to make a couple of mentions about the last week's college football games. A couple of games. Our Bruins went down to their first defeat. They can't seem to beat Oregon up there in Oregon. It's a shame. Oregon just jumped on them and wouldn't let up. And Nick's had a tremendous game, the quarterback at Oregon. Yeah, I think it's a transfer from
Auburn.
Auburn, he had a heck of a game. My goodness, nothing he could do wrong that game. I saw some of that game. LSU knocked off Ole Miss, and a lot of people saying that's not really a surprise that Ole Miss has run up their unbeaten streak against teams that weren't all that good, and LSU is just a better team. But the guy Daniels, the quarterback at LSU, he really showed out in a tremendous game. I think he ran for 3 touchdowns and threw for another 3 or something like that. It's just a crazy game. And then another class of the unbeaten, Syracuse, which has been a surprise this year, I guess, lost to Clemson in a rather close game. So just want to mention those 3 things. Just some interesting
and to that extent, in the coming weeks, we'll talk more about the leading candidates to be in the college football playoffs. We know right now you have Georgia, Alabama still in the mix, Clemson, Ohio State, Michigan, a couple of others. But as the schedule winds down, it'll be a little easier to figure out who will likely be there, given what they do against their remaining schedule. So we'll cover that in the future. One of the things I did want to add off the field, well, I guess it's off the field and on the field, is that it just was reported Brittany Griner's appeal.
I was going to bring that up.
It was denied by a Russian court, so her 9-year sentence has been upheld.
Isn't that something? That's incredible, man. I feel so bad for that sister.
Yeah, I do too. It's awful.
But she's caught up in this geopolitical stuff because the relationships between the 2 countries at an all-time low, I guess, back from 40, 50 years ago, between Russia and the United States. And there's also a cautionary tale on people who travel, outside of this country. When you go on other places, you better know what the rules are, and I don't know if this young lady is guilty of what they're accusing her of or not, but if she took some product in there that was questionable, and I guess what I'm saying is don't put yourself in a position that people can jam you up, and I feel bad for her, and I hope that gets resolved somehow, and they find some way to swap her out with somebody or something that'll come home. But it's just ridiculous to make an example of her like that. I think it's terrible. But,
and I think your point to make an example is right on, because the cautionary tale you gave is an appropriate one for people, because you're right. You just never want to get caught up in something and become someone's example. That said, the likelihood is whatever illegal substances she was caught with, and I'm not justifying it, but from what I gather, it wasn't that much of anything, and that says just a number of people probably have that on their person, and it probably doesn't warrant the sentence she got. But my take on all this is, and you said it, so I'll just give a few tidbits, but you've already said it. She's gotten caught up in this geopolitical issue. But I think there are a number of things here, and people are not going to like what I'm getting ready to say. But when I look at this, I go from Putin, and maybe you can say slash Russia, but more Putin. What is he known as? Well, we know he's anti-West, anti-West, anti-U.S. Brittany Griner is a U.S. citizen.
Right.
He's considered a racist.
Right.
Okay, and so she's been a black woman. So that, again, I'm not necessarily saying he's doing it because she's black, but you can't escape it. And he's considered homophobic. And she's a lesbian. I don't know if I don't know what the proper terms are. They always change it, but I'll use that one. So when you consider that Putin's anti-West, anti-U.S., considered a racist, and is homophobic, she's the perfect foil for him to, and I don't think he's going to let up. And you're right, they're going to have to hope for some swap, and then the U.S. is probably going to have to give up a lot more than they want to. But I just feel so bad for her, but that's just horrible.
If the U.S. is willing to do that.
No, that's what I said. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's my point. I don't know if the U.S. is going to give up more than, because Russia's going to go for it.
Sure.
And that's what I mean. I don't know if the U.S. is going to do that.
Right, because it's not how important is she in the scheme of things.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. Just a pawn. It's sad.
So I think everyday people are going to have to keep putting pressure on the U.S. government to say, this is unfair, and it sends a horrible message for folks. So
right. I mean, somebody taking something in for medicinal, personal use, as opposed to trying to sell some illicit drugs.
Absolutely.
Get 9 years in jail is absurd.
Absolutely.
It's absurd. Completely absurd.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's why I just say this is so horrible, man. I can't imagine being in that position. Hey, man, before we close the show, I know you probably don't think I need to do it, but it's not an omission, but I wanted to make sure I paid due diligence. Last week, you right on time about the way they don't separate or talk about or give context for World Series information versus postseason, and it actually waters down the accomplishments of the past greats. And, the example we were talking about and you mentioned was Mickey Mantle, with his 18 home runs. And plus, he's on the all-time list of so many other postseason categories. However, all of his, like everybody that played during this time, it was World Series only, and it was the best in each league only. And I talked about, when I used Mantle, I talked about some of the people he faced in World Series play, Hall of Fame pitchers, and I mentioned Koufax and Drysdale of the Dodgers, and I mentioned Warren Spahn of the Braves. And I don't know, I dummied up. I don't know why I forgot about Bob Gibson of the Cardinals. And Juan Marshall of the Giants. And then a person who I believe should be in the Hall of Fame for a number of reasons, Don Newcomb of the Dodgers. So it just reinforces some of the great pitchers that Mantle and other players like him had to face when it was the best of the American League versus the best of the National League. So it's not to put down the present day guys, but the fact of the matter just remains that they need to separate World Series. And now even today, even though it's a different game and you got to go through more layers, but you still cannot frown on the guys from yesteryear.
No, and it's just it gives a false image, like you said. It's giving misinformation. They talk about postseason as opposed to World Series and playoffs statistics. They're two separate things, and they should be kept separate.
Yeah.
So these guys will get their due. And one of my heroes, Duke Snyder, still leads in the National League for most home runs in the World Series. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't get any play anymore because he's only had 11.
Yeah, because of all these postseason rounds now.
Playing 50, 60 more games.
Yeah.
They're lumping all this stuff together. Duke might have played, maybe 30. He played a lot of World Series because he was with the Dodgers at the time when they were in it almost every year, every other year. It seemed like a 10-year period there in Brooklyn.
But it was just the one round. That's where
today.
One
round, the 7 games.
The Philadelphia Phillies, nothing. I mean, they're earning it. They're getting ready to play their 4th round this World Series.
Exactly.
And so even if it only goes 4 games, and they have done very well, their players would have played 15 games. See, that's So you got, that's the point.
Exactly. So give those guys another 50, 60 games.
Yeah, exactly.
Look like.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so it's.
We have 100 on from the Barra at 80. So.
I guess we better leave. People gonna stop listening to us, but I think we're gonna beat this to death. People need to understand this, man. This does make no sense at all. Makes no sense at all. Hey, before we close it out, I wanted to just briefly mention, and I guess from week to week, there's always somebody. But I noticed that Bruce Sutter, the Hall of Fame reliever, passed away recently. Former Cub, former Cardinal reliever. I guess though he won his Cy Young with the Cubs in the late 70s, but he had his biggest postseason moments and his only postseason moments with the Cardinals. And he was on that 82 championship team that they won, where they had all that speed with McGee and Ozzie Smith and those guys, Vince Coleman. And then the other one, man, a little known that I don't know if you were aware, I just found out the other day, Luke Jackson, the former power forward for the Philadelphia 76ers, passed at the age of 80. He was on that great 67 team with the Sixers that won 68 games. He played power forward for Wilt. And, he was a hell of a player. He played his entire career in Philadelphia. I think he played 8 or 9 years, and I'm rounding off, but I think he had, 10.9 rebound a game guy, man, and he played in an all-star game, made the all-rookie team. He was a solid ball player.
He was a solid rebounding defensive player. He was a load.
Yeah, I remember.
I hadn't heard that.
I just heard the other day, man. I hadn't heard it either. And man, it's just one of those glue, what they call glue guys. And man, think about this. I think he was like 6'8", 6'9", 240 then. Would that be strong today?
You're right.
I remember once I heard, and you probably heard more than I had. I once heard that the only person stronger than Luke Jackson was Wilt Chamberlain.
That's probably true. Wilt Chamberlain is stronger than everybody, so that's not saying a lot of something.
Yeah, but I remember Luke Jackson, man.
He was something. He was a load, man.
Yeah, so I wanted to just mention that because we want to keep front and center some of the people who did good things along the way.
Absolutely. Condolences to his family and friends. And rest in peace.
Yeah.
Great ball player.
Yeah. So, good brothers, anything you want to add before we conclude? This hour plus, again, has gone very fast, and we've covered
one
in it.
One last gripe. This is off the sports subject.
Okay.
And, I just want to take a dig at this so-called mainstream media.
Okay.
And they're prompting people for this midterm elections. I'm so tired of seeing these news programs come on and start out with telling everybody that it's a foregone conclusion that the party that's out of power in midterm elections always regains power. Predicting that the Republicans are going to have this sweep of the Congress is just egregious, I think. I think it sets up in some people's minds that there's no reason to even participate because it's a foregone conclusion they're going to win. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so tired of hearing these. Every station does it. Excuse me, I have a moment here. You might want to add to.
Yeah, take a moment. Yeah, let me jump in real quick until you get back on. To your point, it's a narrative that we've seen play out, and probably has played out historically. I think the difference now, though, is that there's so many more platforms and apparatus to get these kind of basically propagandist messages out. And they know that the people who do this for a living, they know that they can if they can deflate the folk that they're wanting to deflate 2-3% here and there, it can change the outcomes of an election, outcomes of who controls a particular body. I agree with you, but it's not an accident, man. We've seen it more and more now, and we don't have a circumstance where the parties compete for idea, or everybody competes for selling the best ideas to move the country in a certain direction. And now what we have is misinformation, propaganda, false information, voter suppression, voter intimidation. It's gone just totally wacky. And instead of, living on your ideas. You know, if you're going to be a conservative or you're going to be a progressive, here's how I think we can take the country in this direction. Here's how we're going to do it. Vote for me. But it's no longer the case anymore.
No, if it ever was, it was all about
right. No, and that's why I said it's always been around. It's always been. It's in overdrive. It's on steroids now.
Absolutely. I agree, but that was the last thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, it's on steroids now.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, man. Well, I think that'll be a good one to close. We'll talk a little bit more about the upcoming election in the next program or two. I'm gonna give my book promo again. For those of you that don't know, I wrote a book called "Tell Me Again Why These Mostly Black Players Are Not in the Hall of Fame. Is It Racial?" You can take a look at it on Amazon.com or Kindle Key Reader. Kindle e-reader. And you can put in my name in the title, and it'll take you to the sample. And if you like it, maybe you might purchase a copy. So, good brother. Again, we've been an hour plus. It's been good. Get you some water, and we're going to close it up until next week. And take care of your end of the world. I know you will. And we'll do this again real soon. All right, man. Take care.